So, welcome to another lesson for this chapter. So, this is entitled Choosing the Best Growing Medium for You. So, of course, before buying a hydroponic growing medium, you need to decide first which plant and even the hydroponic system that you will adapt first. So this is because there are a lot of compatibility measures that you need to consider before buying your own hydroponic growing medium. But there are some hydroponic medium that are more general or they can be used in any hydroponic system. Examples of these are coco coir, uh, of course, clay pebbles, and even gravel. Even imagine those rocks that are, outside your house or what. You can even use those in order for you to have a support for your plant. So let us start by defining what is the role of hydroponic growing mediums first. Hydroponic growing mediums, as I have highlighted in some of the past lessons, they act as a support for your plant. So they can act as a support, and at the same time, some hydroponic mediums, again, not all hydroponic mediums, are providing nutrients. So if you really want to control the amount of nutrients that your plants are getting, it is better to have a growing medium that do not have nutrients themselves. Examples of this are like zeolite and uh peat moss, rice hull. Those are some examples of growing mediums that have nutrients in them. So there are a lot of hydroponic growing mediums that you can choose from. Some of this have higher pH. Some of this have higher or lower water holding capacity and even porosity. So if you're not familiar with these concepts, we will go through them one by one later in this lesson. So another things to consider are their price. Are this hydroponic medium cheaper or are this inside your budget or are they way outside your budget? So those are things that you also need to consider. Another is their usage. Of course, if you are a hydroponic gardening beginner, it would help to choose a growing medium that is easier to use compared to those who needs a lot of cleaning and needs a lot of preparation in order for you to use them. So, of course, you will be needing all of that in considering the options that you can choose from. So some of the hydroponic growing mediums that are available are, of course, I've mentioned coco coir, you have perlite, rice hull, even wood chips can have a great characteristic as a hydroponic growing medium. You also have clay pebbles. If you're not familiar with clay pebbles, I have some clips that I can show to you regarding clay pebbles. Of course, rocks or gravel. You also have like pumice, vermiculite, rock wool, some of those things. But of course, you need to have the knowledge in terms of choosing the right. With this wide array of choices, you might be asking right now, what are the criteria to choose the best growing medium for you? Of course, I'm here to help you with that. The physical properties that you must be looking for a hydroponic growing medium are water holding capacity. You also have pH and of course the porosity. I've mentioned these three characteristics a while back, and some of the hydroponic growing mediums are okay with water holding capacity, but not okay with porosity, or some are pH neutral but does not have like excellent water holding capacity. Now, let me first discuss what are the reasons why we need these three characteristics. Let us start with the water holding capacity. From the term itself, water holding capacity is the ability of a hydroponic growing medium to hold water. So passive hydroponic systems, like for example, what we will be diving into in the next chapters, which is the Kratky system, should not use a growing medium with high water holding capacity. It is because in a Kratky system or in a Kratky hydroponic system, the roots are always immersed in water. This means for 24 hours, that growing medium will always be in the water. If you have a high water holding capacity growing medium, the tendency is that your plant roots will always be exposed to water. What will happen if it will always be exposed to water? That could be a breeding ground for algae, for diseases and pests to grow in. When a passive system is coupled with a high water holding capacity growing medium, you are increasing the risk of diseases like root rot and algae development. So we need to remember that these organisms actually like places where there is a lot of water, where there is low oxygen, and of course is stagnant. And from the term passive deep water culture itself, that is a perfect breeding ground for this organism. So in Kratky system, it is advised to use a hydroponic growing medium with a lesser or a medium water holding capacity. That is the reason why I am recommending gravel because it has it does not absorb water that well. Also, clay pebbles is a good way to go in deep water culture and Kratky systems. And yeah, with those options, you are lessening the possible root rot development and algae development. Another thing that you should consider is porosity. When we say porosity, have you imagined like a sponge? The sponge that you use for dishwashing is actually composed of a lot of pores. So inside that are a lot of spaces where it could be a place for water or air. So the growing medium that you will use for hydroponics should also be porous. This is because it will allow your plants or it will allow the roots to have respiration. As I've mentioned in the past chapters, your roots are also breathing in the process called cellular respiration. And especially in passive systems where there are no air pumps present, it is important that from the growing medium itself, you already have spaces for air and water to flow into. You need to provide that. Thus, in a Kratky system, it is best to use porous growing mediums like gravel and clay pebble. And of course, some of the other things that you need to consider are pH. If you do not want like a very high maintenance system in terms of pH, you need to choose a hydroponic growing medium with a neutral pH. Some of the hydroponic growing medium have a high pH or a low pH. Example of this is zeolite. Zeolite can be acidic or basic. So if you place zeolite into a hydroponic system, there is a huge possibility that it could alter the pH of your growing medium. And if you have that differing pH of your nutrient solution, you are also affecting the availability of nutrients in the water. Another thing to consider is the size of your growing medium. There are some growing mediums like pebbles who are much bigger compared to other growing mediums like cocoa coir. Cocoa coir has a very little particle or even perlite. Perlite, it measures like, I think, less than 2 millimeters, whereas clay pebble can measure up to 10 and above. So the reason why particle size is important, it's because it will also affect the porosity and the water holding capacity of your growing. medium. Another thing why it is important is in some systems, like for example, in an active deep water culture system. This system uses like water pumps or air pumps to supply and to circulate the water. So if you have like very huge particle size hydroponic growing medium, there's tendency that when these clay pebbles go into the water, these big particles could go into the tubes of your water pumps or your air pumps. In that mechanism, it could also damage your pumps. And of course, one of the best things that you need to take note in choosing a hydroponic growing medium is the plant itself. The plant height is one of the biggest factors that could affect a growing medium. Imagine if you have a growing medium that has a very light weight and you have a plant that will grow really, really tall. So imagine that would not be a good combination because there is an increased possibility that your plant will bend towards one side or the other with that kind of system. So it is very important to account for the plant height. So there are some hydroponic growing mediums that are used often in leafy vegetables. For instance, leafy vegetables have this rosette flower formation. So it could it looks like a bouquet or what. So that type of formation is good for rock wool. Rock wool is just like a little box or a sponge that you can use. And the rosette shape of the leafy vegetables is actually complementing to the size of the rock wool. The rosette shape could be balanced all throughout the rock wool. So this specific growth pattern actually balances the crop anchorage itself. So small growing mediums like rockwool or sponge is already good if you have leafy vegetables. On the other hand, if you have, you know, plants who are bigger, plants that are bigger, for instance, peppers, eggplant. So these are plants that needs more powerful support. So this is where the usage of clay pebbles or gravel would be beneficial. So those are the things that you need to consider in looking for a hydroponic growing medium. So I hope that at this point you are already narrowing down your choices on the best hydroponic growing medium that you can use. But I advise, if you are a gardening beginner, it is best to use gravel or clay pebbles first because these are a more flexible and I think a cheaper options compared to other ones. So thank you for listening for this lesson. In the next lesson, we will look at the Kratky system itself and how could you use the different materials that I have overlined here to create your own hydroponic system.